Look, we're live. Look what's happened to my keyboard, folks. It's all bent in the heat. Look at that. It's all bent. Now,
Heat. Yeah, like you got heat there.
Not compared to you, because you're frying eggs outside, but it was 30 Celsius. So, Jeff did me the favour of sending me something over Facebook that inspired me. I asked for the title of this episode, and he said autofocus. Then he wrote nice and short for you, and then I thought that's what he didn't say to the that's what she said woman.
All right. On that note, we're finally doing another Homicide review. Ben keeps putting me off. But,
so you can do it the other way, right? You can have a whole series of that's what he didn't say gags.
Right. Get through the 22nd episode of season 4 like sometime next decade. But for now, we're on the 3rd episode of Focus, as teleplay by Bonnie Mark, from a story by Tom Fontana and Henry Brommel, and directed by Alan Taylor. So, I'll recap the story here. The episode opens with Lewis mentioning that something strange is in the air. In Pendleton towards G's office, where Kellerman is currently located. Munch tells Lewis that he is paranoid and afraid of failure, thinking that G will set him up with the rookie Kellerman or a new partner. Just as Kellerman walks out of G's office and sits at Corsetti's old desk, an alarm goes off in the building. They have to change and find themselves working using a vault as the new box. Another change the detectives must get used to is the fact that Kay Howard has been promoted to sergeant. On the scene where a woman has been shot. At the scene, the detectives meet a young cameraman named J.H. Brody, who says he didn't see anything. Howard quickly makes her presence as Sergeant Felt, handling out, sorry, I'm doing a great job reading here, advice to Kellerman and Lewis. Lewis does not take this well. Brody, who was at the scene of the murder, finds out that the shooter can be seen on his tape. His boss tells him that if he takes the tape to the police before it airs on the news, he'll be fired. Faced with a tough decision, Brody makes his way to G, but is thrown out of the building before he can state his case. Lewis and Kellerman meet up with Brody outside. He offers the tape in exchange for being able to film the arrest. He is still struggling with becoming a new father. He displays his anger at the new surroundings by slamming a freezer door repeatedly. And if any work habits will change once his new baby arrives. Pendleton says that not much will change. Russert offers some advice to Howard and invites her out to dinner. Howard rejects the invitation and tells Russert that her personality will not change just because her rank has. Review the tape given to them by Brody and get a clear picture of the suspect in the shooting, brandishing a gun. The detectives then canvass the area of the shooting and are led to a wedding that the suspect is attending. The detectives make the arrest just as the suspect and his bride-to-be are exchanging vows, and another arrest when a man in the wedding party tries to flee. The arrest and later a search of the suspect's house bring in a cache of tapes that show many crimes being committed, including... The episode ends with Brody being fired, even though he has the arrest of the wedding on tape. His boss keeps the tape and tells him he's gone. Howard shows up at the bar where Munch is working. The place is empty, minus one man passed out. Howard opens up and talks to Munch about how hard it is to get for peers. Later, the pair share a dance. So, do you want me to read a fan review before I go to you, or you want to?
Yeah. What about David? Is it B2 Morris?
Okay, David B226 Morris says, the season of change continues in this episode with Lewis, who has been flying solo since Corsetti's suicide near the beginning of season 3, finally gets a permanent partner, new homicide detective Mike Kellerman. Meldrick is understandably jumpy, as Munch cheerfully reminds him in the teaser. He has partnered with every detective in the squad except for Howard, and none of the partnerships have been successful. The partnership will work better, even though it gets off to a rocky start in this episode. Of course, everyone is even more unsettled than when the entire squad is forced to move into a nearby bank due to the gas leak. In this sea of confusion, Meldrick and Mike get their first case together, the murder of an old lady at a bus stop. Despite the fact that there were people waiting with her in typical fashion, no one seems to have seen anything. Indeed, the main witnesses are so focused on their terrible blind date that they don't notice anything. The blind date couple, by the way, played by Fisher Stevens and Ileana Douglas, who are, at least were at the time. Indeed, the main witnesses, okay, I already said that part. The detectives are left swinging until they get help from an unlikely source, cameraman J.H. Brody. As it turns out, Brody gets the killer on tape entirely by accident and then spends a good deal of the episode to the detectives that he has something worth watching. Naturally, he has a price. He wants an exclusive on the arrest of the killers. Eventually, he does get this, but it's not enough to save his job. The higher-ups at his TV station are far more focused on getting an exclusive than they are on solving a crime. When Brody gives this up, he is promptly fired. Again, this is closer to real life when getting your job done is more important than doing the right thing. I'm going to skip that part because, spoiler, it's about future events. So,
I actually quite like this episode.
He basically says some stuff about how he didn't particularly care for Brody. Be a version of David Simon, the man who spent a year on the killing streets and wrote the book. But Simon stayed outside of the story in his book. Brody keeps stepping into it on TV. It is impossible to pretend like the detectives do that he isn't there, but we're never sure what to make of him. Another major change that never completely gelled occurs in Autofocus. Howard is promoted to sergeant. It was made very clear that a sergeant's role was mostly office work, although they are allowed to go out on cases. This is the reason that sergeants were basically written out of the series when the show premiered. And since there was already one office-bound leader in Giardello, there would seem to be less for Howard to do. Howard gets squeezed because these two extremes, and as a result would have... skip that. Also, kind of a spoiler. It's a great pity because this episode illustrates there was a lot that could have been done exploring Howard's character as she dealt with the challenges of her new job, how others deal with a work friend. Anyway, despite all these problems, there are some interesting elements in this episode. We see how Meldrick and Mike reluctantly dance around each other as they both try to settle into a new situation. They don't start out very well, but by the end of the episode, they are slowly beginning to function as a team. They will be a somewhat lighter version of the A-team for the show, Bayless and Pimbleton. Generally speaking, the story surrounding them will be somewhat lighter in tone, which doesn't necessarily make them less interesting, as we shall see. Also somewhat interesting are the killers themselves, James and Trevor Douglas, two 17-year-old boys who went from armed robbery to videotaping random killings. In typical Homicide fashion, they refused to confess, even though the police had the videotape of the shooting of the victim. Even more bizarre is that they arrest the shooter at his own wedding, suggesting that the previous night's murder was his bachelor party. When the breadth of their criminal activities are explained to G, he is remiss of how young people have gone from playing cowboys and spacemen to these kind of felonies. That is all the philosophy that we get for this particular episode. In addition to that, that would be, I think, the only thing that would have made that scene more perfect is G had turned and made one more comment to Kellerman about it was his wearing jeans. It would have been a true, complete G scene then. Autofocus isn't a great episode. There are a lot of elements within the old, but good enough. It was a little more traditional cop show than old-style Homicide. Well, that is just how the show has begun to evolve. Poorer examples, unfortunately, lay ahead. My score, 8. So he still gave it an 8, despite kind of sounding like he was ragging on it. But anyway, what do you have to say?
I think it was a good episode. First of all, it was a good scene between Russert and Kay Howard.
Yeah.
Now, there's something which I find peculiar, and that is all this stuff with promoting Howard. G is always going on about being short of people and the clearance rate. Wouldn't promoting Howard and giving her a desk job make it harder to increase the clearance rate?
Well, not necessarily.
Why would he want her in that role? Be a person down?
two things. One is it's not actually his decision to promote her. It wasn't his idea. She decided to do it, and the way they do the promotions is if you do what you make above certain number of people make above a certain score on the sergeant's exam, and they're automatically promoted. So G actually is in a position of being thankful that she is still in his command. What happens as soon as somebody gets promoted is the department treats them as sort of like, well, now they're moving them around where we want them. So it could harm the clearance rate if they had transferred her out right away, but they didn't. And she's still, like the review said, sergeants are still able to go out on cases. And if you look, they showed the board at one point in this episode where it showed that all of Howard's cases were in black. So basically, G is probably not too worried about clearance rate, and that she'll actually do a better job helping the other detectives.
Right, because she always closes her cases anyway.
Right. So basically, if she's needed to be the primary on a case, she can still do that. But in the meantime, she can help everybody else close their cases.
But
so.
I would have liked a line from him to himself, though. I wonder what this is going to do for the clearance rate, because he does seem to be concerned by the clearance rate, very much so.
Yeah, well, obviously he gets that from his bosses too, and there'll be more on that later in the season. So, in terms of how all that plays out.
Now, when he said pirates and cowboys, what is that a politically correct version of cowboys and Indians?
No, I think he was just using two different examples of something kids would pretend to be.
Oh man,
those are just the things that popped into his head,
Yeah, there was a well-acted look on his face, the sort of like the being appalled by the SP killers, the killers giving SPs a bad name, but they're just doing it for.
Yeah, well, G gets that wistful look on his face, like, yearning for the old days. But as he and other Guardians will always be faced with, is they talk about the good old days, but then they're always telling stories that tell you that basically the good old days always had plenty of problems too. So.
Well, especially when it's a black guy.
Yeah, so I mean, he over the course of the series, he'll have these reminiscing moments, but he'll also talk about things that were not so good from the old days too. So
I'll just remind the audience that I think the character of G is in his 50s and it's set in the 90s. So 30 years ago for him, he'd be in his 20s, and that would be like the 1960s.
Yeah, so he became a cop in the 60s, and he's already had an episode where he talked about how basically he had to make a decision as a young officer, choose sides, against some of his fellow black people in his community, because as a cop he was seen by a lot of them as being the enemy. So yeah,
there were some good looks, like Giardello, not wanting Frank to smoke, when there could be a huge gas leak.
Yeah. Like, what? I'm outside.
Anyway,
no problem.
I always like to do some bits of old technology. Right, let's go through these. Oh, that was the look he gave him when he saw him smoking. And that's him rolling his eyes after then. Yeah. They're still on typewriter mode, even though it's 1995. That's because the equipment is usually old.
Yeah, they will slowly upgrade. Max Perlich, that's the guy who plays Brody.
Right, you see, what I try to do with these episodes is I always try to photograph this beginning stuff, which gives, like, the names of the guest stars and who wrote it. Who's that?
Not sure who Sagan Lewis is.
You know, if And he almost is turned sideways there. But if Munch turned sideways, he'd disappear.
Yeah. There you have the couple I mentioned earlier, Ileana Douglas and Fisher Stevens. For my generation, probably knows Fisher Stevens best as from his role in the 2 Short Circuit movies, but where he played accent. Speaking of fake accents,
Right. Yeah.
but he really said he was from Pittsburgh. He was also, after that, he went on to be on a somewhat successful series on Fox called Key West that he was the star of, so some people might know him from that.
This is almost a shell suit. If it was almost a shell suit. Right. Got those names. Yeah, I love that bit from Frank where he goes, "Oh, what the hell is this?"
Yeah.
This is some sort of something that would have been there at the time. There's sort of like, you know, obviously probably part of the actual location.
Yeah.
Now, you've probably got the
Something to do
DVD,
with
and it might have like an information text where it's like, what is this thing? They might have had like a featurette on it. What is that thing?
Unfortunately, no. It doesn't have anything about that commentary on this episode either, so.
But what about all the NTs watching that are going to be raising an eyebrow and going, I want to know what that thing is. That's the best bit of this episode.
They're going to have to do their own research, Ben.
I tell you, you'd might be interested in that. If you say that to David M. Kersey, that might interest them. Right, he looks like he's dressed like Gordon Gekko here. You know, from Wall Street. You know, with the pinstripe top and the red braces. Then we've got Kay Howard in a tie. And then there's that scene between them, sort of like, I don't know if they're setting up her, what's the expression they had in England? Drinking from the furry cup, I think is the expression. Right.
Which means?
Well, I mean, she did make the suggestion that she might be on a date with a woman.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right. I like how
I think she was just messing with Munch when she said that.
Yeah. But I like how she put a little dig in here about her playing the feminine card.
Mm-hmm.
About the way she dresses. Because obviously Russet puts more effort in. Now, of course, the actress might say, hey, that's not my character, that's the network.
Yeah.
And then you got old tellies, but, you know, that's what police stations have. They're not up to date on the latest equipment.
I thought the one kid, the shooter, looked like he was one of the kids from Crisscross. He's a reference some people might get. Had a big hit with a song called Jump.
Baggy 90s shirts.
Yeah, I can't remember. I don't think that's the first appearance of that judge, but I could be wrong. But she definitely won't be her last. You'll see more from her.
Yeah, quite well acted as well.
Yeah, it was a funny scene there where she's got a history with Lewis, but she doesn't with Kellerman, so she wasn't going to sign the warrant until Kellerman vouched for it.
This is the scene where G is despondent at the killing just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some good acting there on, to such an extent that I considered making one of these the thumbnail. But you see, sometimes with someone of this complexion, when it's like a thumbnail and it's like that's big, you can't really see a lot on the face.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes there's some great expressions on Frank's face that I've decided not to use as thumbnails because you know, I'd have to lighten the image, especially when it's an expression.
Or G.
Yeah, pardon?
Being discriminated against for his dark skin again.
Yeah, it's not my fault. I mean, I'd have to lighten the picture to show facial expression because of the thumbnail, of course.
And always trying to lighten the black man.
Obviously, on a big screen, it's not a problem. It's fantastic, it's good acting. But, you know. There we go. Now, these look like they're done by the same person. This looks like this actor needs some training.
Well, we've already established that Meldrick Lewis / Clark Johnson, the actor who plays him, doesn't have the best handwriting, and he's the only left-handed detective. Left-handers are not exactly known for their nice handwriting.
Are you left-handed, Jeff?
In theory.
Ooh, because
I don't actually write with my left hand very often, anyway. Because I grew up learning how to write with my right hand, so that's what I use, because I can write faster with it. I can actually write neater with my left hand if I write slowly.
Right.
I can't write fast with my left hand.
So, if you ever did pay to have yourself EEG'd by Dario Nardi, your results could be all over the place. Because half of left-handers...
To see, he basically had a way of telling from looking at the brain whether somebody was like mentally right-handed. So I was curious if he'd actually remember that, what it would say. So because I've done this whole tangent on me, but I've done like online tests they do for that says basically I mentally left-handed and became mixed-handed because I grew up learning to be right-handed, basically. So.
I mean, so basically Dario was confirming that left-handed people are maybe more creative and do have different brains, where he had a rule. He had a no lefties rule for a long time because there weren't the patterns in the brain that there are amongst right people. There were more unique.
I didn't assert myself at a young age. When I and I had this thing of I kind of like to hide things from people, from adults especially, and so I kind of let on about in terms of liked pretending to be something else, and that was one of those things, sort of, I guess, because I remember in first grade there was a time my teacher I was scissors and she got mad at me and said, "No, those are for left-handed kids." And I was like, "How does she know I'm not?" But I didn't even. I was just like, "Okay, I guess I'm not supposed to be that." So anyway.
So on this board, I mean, you say that the continuity person went to a lot of effort to make sure that these were actually proper cases from previous episodes. So do you recognize
some of
any
them?
there?
They're not all.
Well, yeah, because we assumed some things go on in between episodes.
Yeah, in fact, a little behind the scenes on that is a lot of the names that they used came from people who worked on the show in some capacity, crew members or family member of the writers, directors, crew people, whatever. So the names that get filled in between actual cases you see, sometimes if you pay close enough attention to the credits, you'll see a last name in the credits that's on the board somewhere. And in fact, there's a couple of them on there repeatedly where you'll see the same name up there. Over the seasons, there's some repeats where you'll see the same name. But anyway, it's an interesting one there at the top of Howard Zierman. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah, so sometimes they do have the continuity of. Sometimes you will see the previous cases up there. The only thing I think is not quite up to continuity is Steady died. They left his name up there for a while, and supposedly just been suspended, but they erased them off the board entirely, including their cases. Like, been, I guess, assigned to somebody else, and they never mentioned anything about that. So.
Yeah, Did one of the extras?
I guess it was just assumed.
Did it explain the codes? How the codes were assigned?
I don't think they ever did on the show. The book says the way they're done, and it's not the same way as it is on the show. That's one of the things they changed to make it like easier to follow, I guess, on the show.
Right.
Because in the actual board, they actually didn't have case numbers, but they didn't have the names across the way they are there. They had the sergeant's names at the top, have the cases underneath that sergeant, and then they would actually just have the initials of the detective that was the primary on each case. So the cases would be listed in order under that sergeant. So anyway, they decided for the show's purposes that they liked to do it aesthetically. They just liked having the names across there and then the cases under it. But anyway, but no, as far as I know, they never really explained that. Just
now,
start numbering at the beginning of the year.
I've noticed that there's a Crosby there, and there's a Nash there somewhere else. Is there a Stills there as well?
What's that?
Is there a Still? You know, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I noticed a Nash in one of the lists, and then there's a Crosby there.
Oh,
so I just wondered if
maybe
do that as like a little joke.
Yeah, maybe could be on there somewhere. I don't know.
Oh,
yeah. So okay, leave it up on that. So we talked about previous cases.
There's Pratt.
Like Hamilton, you've got Battisto. Right, that was one of the cases that they had on. Gasparino was the one that Howard when Pemberton wasn't there. So yeah, there's a few cases I remember from episodes on here. Yeah. Borkin, of course, was the one that the pedophile guy that killed the kid. That was Borkin. Name.
Because Pratt was killed, so that's in red because that was never sold. Yes.
Right.
And he was the one. Was it played by Steve Buscemi, the sort of fake intellectual?
Yep. Yep. That's him. And of course, Landry and Nash under Pemberton's name that were from the fire episodes, the last case that he had before.
Right, so we've got Crosby, we've got Nash, but I don't think we've got Stills. All right, there we go. Now, if David Kersey was organising the DVD, this would be like the menu. You know, because you've got personology, this would be like the menu system for accessing the episodes. You know, like on his second page. We're going to the different episodes now. With that, a little bit more. Then we've got the Svelte Munch. Yeah, I think I can hear you now, Jeff. Now, they never actually did a close-up of this, I don't think. I'm not sure. Where it's got the three of them in the old-school uniforms.
I think they did in one previous episode. They zoomed in on it for a little bit.
No, I mean, yeah, I think they did it a bit more than this, but...
yes, folks, Munch will get to handle cases again. No, it seems like he's been out of commission for a while, but he'll get some more cases.
Right, and then we've got... And then also we've got...
He suffered a little bit from Ned Beatty leaving the show, and he lost his partner, but he'll get back into things.
Right, so I'll just promote some other videos. So I did a video with Rachel. We did some... she's at ENFJ. We did a video about... we did some... we did a libertarian video about, and she actually did have that thing where she was allowed to cheat in an exam by bringing notes in on a card. And that's her showing her Liberty lip balm. And then this is from another video where I'm doing an impression of Mussolini. That's in a short video. And then this is just randomly put in because I just think it's a fantastic costume from an episode of Game of Thrones. There we go.
You're getting really random now.
Yeah, but it's a nice costume, though. Now, usually she has long hair, but, you know, she got cut off, so... Now, that actress in real life probably is a... she's got a lot... I think she's an artisan in real life. She's got a lot of edge to her as Lena Headey, and she's a very good actress. Right, I don't think there's anything else. What else can I say about this episode? Right, so...
Do you have any thoughts on either Lewis and Kellerman scenes or Brody, the camera guy, or anything about that?
Well, I love the way that Lewis is played. I like the actor, the way he performs that character. Is I mean, I think you said before that he might be your favorite, yours and Morgan's favorite character, and I like him as well.
Yeah, even though Hamilton is the one that I relate to the most, if I just flat out had to pick over the course of the show who's my favorite character, it would by a slight edge, it would be Lewis over Hamilton. Even though I obviously like Hamilton a lot too, and I relate to him. Well, not much more because Lewis is a lot like him too. I mean, in terms of personality-wise, I think he's in my ISFP.
Yeah, I mean, I like Lewis I like the actor, but brilliantly performed. The way. Yeah. Did you say, was he a comedian as well?
I don't, not that I know of. He actually had kind of actually like Andre Braugher. He had actual like theater. I don't know if he has a theater degree. He might though, but definitely went to like. So he had some.
So maybe so. When you've heard him in interviews, does he use the same voice that he uses to play Lewis?
No. His voice is not as. It's not as Lewisy.
Not as Ebonicky.
Right. Yeah, he's not as much. Yeah.
And
sarcastic, if not more so, but his accent is not. His voice is a little different.
Is it a little bit more? Is it a little bit posher? A little bit more American theatre standard?
Yeah, I mean, not heavily that way, but he's a little bit more sophisticated sounding, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. So I like him. That little bit was a highlight with that random. I think a lot of the MPs would like that. You show that to MPs, like, what's this thing coming off the wall? So lots of NP points there.
Yeah, I like
and the way
the scene.
And his reaction to that was brilliantly played.
Like,
and there was another
like Hamilton's, showing his nice little drama queen side of his personality.
I mean, there was
and Lewis and Kellerman in the car, the scene, where they stop and get the coffee and the Danish. I thought that was cool, the way they cut from him saying he's not going to get the Danish to then they both got the Danish.
So basically, we had a number of good character scenes. So, for instance, you had Frank and Bayliss talking about the impact of having a child, and Frank being in denial. Then we had the good scene between Russert and Howard, which was a callback to their previous, where Howard was a little bit cut out by, because she went up to Russert was a bit of a heroine, and then I think she called her a bitch under her breath, because she didn't give her much respect when she gave her praise initially. That may have been season 1, I'm not sure.
I have to give him credit because as much as Russert, the character, was kind of batted around and not used well over her time, she had some good moments along the way, and I think that was one of her relationship with Howard was actually one of the better things about her character when they had scenes, because they had this kind of awkward tension between the two, because it's like there's sort of this respect, but there's also a rivalry, sort of, as being like basically the two most involved in the homicide. So there was always this sort of tension between them. So I think they had some good scenes. And also, I thought was funny the scene where Lewis and Kellerman kind of like their first moment of sort of bonding as partners when they steal the car that Pemberton and said he'd be right back.
Yeah.
Because he's like, well, you did say to take the first car that came in.
Yep.
So that was funny.
Yeah. So basically, I'll give this episode quite a high ranking. I'll give this an 8.
I would also. So there we go.
Sorry, your sound cut out.
And I said I also gave it an 8.
All right. Okay. Okay.
So thanks for watching. Next time for
Sorry, your sound cut out again. Next time for what?
Called A Doll's Eyes.
A Doll's Eyes. That's a lot of is in the title. So
and I'll help you with making sure you're watching the right episode later. But that's it for the review.
okay, that's bye for me, folks.
Bye.